Your Highness, ladies and gentlemen, friends, again we're together. It can't be true. After 2 years of not being able to meet, here we have Kurt Leuber's baby again. And we are ready to go forth in the defense of liberty. We're very lucky to be here again. Thank you for inviting us and asking us to come, and thank you for asking me to speak. So, this is a wonderful occasion, and I want to celebrate it. I'm going to give just a few pictures, not going to use PowerPoint at all. I'm going to give a picture, and the first one is an engraving by Goya. It says there that the slumber of reason begets monsters. He wanted this to be the first in a series of engravings, but then he was a bit afraid and put it in the middle so that nobody would see what he was doing. But I think it tells a lot of what we say, which is we use reason and we use economics and political science to say how our society should be ruled, and here we fall asleep and look at all those monsters that hover over us. I think this is a way coming from 1798. This is a way of seeing how we are at this moment. In dire straits, democracy and freedom are in danger. And I thought it was the best way to put it forth, to have this wonderful engraving, those eyes that look, those bats that hover over the sleeping thinker are a good representation of what we do. I will want to say something, a thesis there, but the main thing is we, not we, us here, but we writers, thinkers, professors are to blame for what is happening to us. Our ideas are corrupted, and we've passed them on to people. The ideas of enforced equality, ideas of how we can make society into a sort of machine. And we are to blame, not we. We are a small minority that fights and fights again. And I think we are, one of the things I want to say, let's go on fighting. In the end, I think we'll be able to prevail. The idea or the thesis I put forward is summed by a novel called The Moon is the Harsh Mistress. And the phrase is, there ain't no such thing as a free lunch. And this is the corruption in our democracy, that people think they can get something for nothing. And by getting something for nothing, the price comes, the cost comes through the door, through the window cracks. And this is the idea. Let's tell people, look, when you think you're getting something for free, when you think the government is going to help whoever, you'll have to pay for it. And we need to face the idea of cost. Now, after the two happenings, the first one, the economic crisis in 2008, and then the COVID crisis, I think liberalism is in great danger. And the people who are in part to be blamed for it are the middle-of-the-roaders, the people who want to mix freedom with socialism, mix freedom with the help of the state. They complain that the liberal order is in danger. What liberal order? Let me see. Just 1 second, I'm going to... Right. What liberal order? This is not liberal at all. And they say, look, it's falling apart. Why is it falling apart? Because the basis of it, the ethics of it, the idea that you can get something for nothing and that the state should mend the things that don't function in society, they think that it is an order. They want to have a beneficent welfare state grow, and they also want to suppress or to do away with inequalities. Now, inequality, not inequality before the law, certainly, but social inequality is good for us. It shows that people are different and that they're inventing, perhaps becoming multimillionaires. I could, of course, say that a university professor should make as much money as a good footballer, but I'm not going to go that way. So what we have is the idea, A, the state can give us security, can protect the family, can protect us from different dangers, and also that we ought to be all equal. Here is what professors have been saying, and we ought to fight against it. So the idea here is that we have to explain why democracy is not working. We heard a very good introductory speech, and I'm going to give a theory of why it's not working. The welfare state doesn't function, can't function, or it functions too well. And when people point at Finland, point at Sweden, saying there's a very good welfare state where people are honest and they're getting what they vote for, I think that what they're building a society where everybody is told how to behave. I remember being in Sweden and sitting by the young president, the president of the young parts of the Conservative Party. She showed me her identity card and said, in my number, they know I was not born in Sweden. I was born abroad because I have a number that tells people where I'm really Swedish or not. And this idea that the northern countries have the kind of right mixture between the welfare state and liberalism is very wrong. They are building a society, they're building an engine which is oppressing us. Then the economists will tell, look, as I said before, to anything we decide, to anything we are, there's an opportunity cost. It is hidden, but we will pay it. And it's such a fundamental idea that it comes from physics. This is the second law of thermodynamics. If we put order in something, we put disorder around. So the cost of building something is always there. It's always there because by building something, we have to undo something else. We have to pay that cost. The idea of opportunity cost is the essence of the profession of economists. And we as economists here have to insist on opportunity costs which people don't want to look at because they're getting things for free. So we've seen the example in the European Union where the Commission has decided to save us from the effects of COVID and the effects of the financial crisis. And what they've done is the Commission is borrowing a huge amount of money, saying we are borrowing that because if we are the Commission, we haven't borrowed before, the interest rate they're going to charge us is smaller than the interest rate they're going to charge Spain or Greece or even Germany. So a huge amount, and now they're handing it out and telling us what the economy should do, whether it should be greener or use the computer or whatever. So we have the corruption of Brussels going further than ever. They now are getting money by loans. A public debt is a future tax. That is the center of us as public economists. It's a future tax, and people don't think so. They don't pay for it. They even ask for the debt not to be returned. It become perpetual, as if that again was doing away with costs. So we have all sorts of systems, tax avoiding, rent controls, and so on. The The thing is, it can't work, or it can work too much by making us simply parts of the state. And what we have is disappointment and disaffection because we're not getting what was promised. And then disaffection turns to anger. And anger poisons democracy and leads to populism. This is my thesis today. These failures of the welfare state are one of the main reasons for populism and for the crisis of democracy. And at the end of it, I'm going to speak about Latin America, where things are really dire. And by speaking about Latin America, I show how people are disappointed with what was promised to them and therefore are turning to funny ways of understanding democracy. There are many there's much resistance to everything that we want to do about reminding costs. But one thing that Schumpeter called creative destruction. There's a reaction against technology changing our lives, especially now with intelligence. We don't know what they're going to do to us with the computers, where the computers are going to be more intelligent than we humans. In any case, the destruction against free trade, the resistance against free trade, against technical advance, against having a really liberal state is an important idea. I must say that Schumpeter was a socialist, and he wrote that dreadful book, Socialism, Conservatism and Democracy, where he said that the market will fail and socialism won't fail. Very good for prediction by an economist, but he did have this idea that there would be resistance against creative destruction, and that's one of the main things we have in the future. We're going to resist the changes in our lives that technology is going to make for us. Then there's another idea, apart from this resistance against the future, against change. We liberal economists are for change. We don't know what it's going to be, we don't know how it's going to affect us, but we do know that society has been changing ever since prehistory, and in the end it's been for good, even with the wars and everything, and the changes in our situations, it's been for good, and therefore we defend creative destruction. So one of the ideas that is going around with the war in Ukraine is the rebirth of geopolitics. It's the idea that the Russian Federation has that it needs an extended Lebensraum. This is an expression that we know where it comes from. And this idea that we have to be kind to them and understand what they're doing. And if they want a Lebensraum and they want Crimea and they want Ukraine and Finland and the Baltic states and whatever, we ought to understand that they need to have some defense around them. Well, no, we are not for the understanding or the accepting of geopolitics. We want prudent defense, and we want unleashing the creative capacity of the individual in the free market. And so don't say we understand you, Mr. Putin. We don't. We understand you too well. And therefore, we don't want to allow you to build yourself as a barrier around you. No, we want to defend the free market, the individual, and we want to have a defense system just in case. Well, the case is around the corner, I must say. One of the things I want to tell people is that the changes in democracy are very long, come from very long. You don't notice the changes in one election. In the case of the welfare state, we have to go back, not to Roosevelt, not to Beveridge. Roosevelt in 1933, Beveridge in 1942. It's 1860, it's 1848 where the change started. And in this case, here we have John Stuart Mill. I wrote my thesis on him, and he influenced me for a time. I must confess, his kind of socialism was the one I understood. Yes, he wanted to have a cooperative society. He wanted to help unions. help the workers, telling them, no, if you have a cooperative society, it must be a competitive society. Well, he was dreaming, and it wasn't a competitive society, and it started in 1848 with his principles of political economy. And now I know what I believed was wrong. So it's 1848. Look at the time it's taken. And the time we're going on, it'll take some time, unless we do something when we meet disaster. Here we have another person, the Chancellor with his pointed hat, and he was not a madman, certainly not. He was a very good, sober politician who built Germany and who went very careful about winning wars and winning one war at a time and a small war if possible. But he started the welfare state. He started the welfare state in around 1870 by stealing the clothes of the socialists to try and stop the Socialist Party from going ahead. And here we had the Health Insurance Act of 1883, the Accident Insurance Act of 1884, Old Age and Disability Act 1889, and then, though he was dismissed by the Emperor, then you had the Workers' Protection Act of 1891, Children's Protection Act of 1903, and then it all went around Europe. And I studied the part in Spain, and this was the time when Spain started its welfare state. So welfare state is not of today. It comes from a century back, and we have to watch what is going to happen in the future. We perhaps won't see it, perhaps I won't see it, but I know it's going to be slow and steady. And if we are not careful, we will have what we had with Bismarck, which was, he started it in 1860, around 1860, a bit later in 1880, also with a terrible sharing out of Africa and Asia in the Berlin Congress of 1881-82. That's when they decided to share out the world and have imperialism. And this is something that comes from back. This should be a lesson from the United States of America, in the sense that they are the head of our coalition, they are a maritime empire. They would be much better if they had more freedom, freedom also from the things we heard today about special interests, and also economic freedom and less intervention. And then they would be real leaders of what we are, or the kind of empire that we make up together. So socialist policies have to be evaluated in the long run. I have here some figures. Simply, this is the figure of the size of the welfare state without education. You'll have it in my printed paper. Without education. Still, we see that all nations of the OECD, except 6, have a growing welfare state from the time of 2019, or from the time of 2000, the year 2000 to 2019, and it goes on. The welfare state is growing, and it'll be growing now much more because of COVID and because of what the European Union is going to do. There's one thing which is interesting here. We have the United States are here with a low part of GDP going to public social policy. But when we move on to the next one, which is the total amount in social spending, the United States goes up into the second place. Because in the United States, still, most of the social spending is private and not public. They're going the wrong way, but we know that they could stop there and be an example for all of us. So what I'm going to do, because I don't have much time, is to look at 2 examples of private activity being or displacing public activity. And I'm going to talk about pensions. I'm going to talk about education. Pensions should be private. Education should be private. None of this state education that we have. In some countries, it doesn't matter. And here in Liechtenstein, I don't think it matters, and people are educated in the public sector and are happy with it. But in Spain and other places, education is a weapon of the state. A weapon of the state or a weapon of nationalities. So there should be private education. Let me go to Piñera. Let me go to Piñera. Piñera is the introducer some 40 years ago of private pensions in Chile. It's going the wrong way, Chile, with a peculiar president who could never finish his university studies and who now tries to get back to pay-as-you-go pensions. Pay-as-you-go means that the present working generation pays for the people who are retired, in the hope that they will pay, when they become retired, they'll be paid by the new working generation. The trouble is that working generation are smaller every day, and also they could be angry at the taxes favoring the retired. So what he proposed was, and did in Chile, was forcing, for the time being, hoping that someday people would want to save, that 10% of the wages of people in employment should go to their own fund for future retirement. They had a little book that showed how much they had saved and how much they would go. In fact, the average real growth of those funds has been above 6% a year, real growth. And it worked. The thing was that we have to move from the system pay-as-you-go to the savings system. And that is difficult because there are some people who haven't been able to save much because it started late. And therefore they are saying, look, the pension we're getting is small. And give us a public pension again. They have a small one, but a big public pension again, because the point of going to a capitalized system is the move away from the pay-as-you-go system. And though in many countries they're looking at it, in China, they're looking at José Piñera told me he'd been in China to try and convince them, and they were interested in having a capitalized system for pensions. Though we have that, I think the system is in danger, especially in the country where they first introduced it, which was in Chile. So, this is about education. In this case, we have the man who wrote The Beautiful Tree. James Tooley, the vice chairman of Buckingham University, where I teach, and he wrote this beautiful tree, which was going to different poor countries to see whether they had private education. And whenever he visited a country, the officials, both the officials of the country and the officials of the international systems or the international institutions, said, no. Private education is only for the rich. There's nothing that no private education for the poor. So he went around the different countries and found in Nigeria 32 private schools in a shanty town in Lagos. Lagos was the old the Portuguese word for lakes, and in fact they all walk in water and drive the bicycles in water because they have a sort of poor Venice on the lake. And he also went to India, where he says there are 300,000 low-cost schools among the poor in India. And those local schools, even if public school is free of charge, the poor parents sent their children to the local charging $1 a month, or in Ghana $5 a month, charging, despite the fact they have to pay, they get educated. In Lagos, there was a fisherman who said his daughter, in 4 years of schooling, had only learned one thing: number one, the number one. And so he went to complain to the public school, and they called in the police, and he was arrested for saying that this is how public teaching works. And he has the same thing in China. The officials, when he went to the officials, say, we've seen some private schools, and the Chinese in Guangzhou, the Chinese official said, this is illogical. Our system, our socialist system, gives free education to everyone. So you can't have private education. In fact, what they had is 586 private education schools, low-cost schools in Guangzhou, and so on. So this is to show both in pensions and in education that the private system works. And we are so it's pig-headed to insist on public education and insist on public pensions. So we shouldn't be a halfway house. We should go for the whole hog and say, look, we don't want public education, we don't want public system, we don't want a public health system, nothing of that. The private system, the market works, and we don't really believe in it, or many people don't really. Here, yes, but in other places we don't really believe in it. And we want the state to subsidize this and that. So because that's the way to get equality, and it simply doesn't work. Or if it works too well, because people, the young children and people, have their opinions formed by the teachers in the schools, teachers who are unionized and resist competition as they do in the United States. Now, my next thing, if I press this, 1 second. Here we have our villain. We had two wonderful heroes before, and here we have our villain. 1 second. That's it. He's at the heart of what I say, which is that this gentleman, Ernesto Laclau, born in Argentina and teaching at Essex University. So I don't know what he did to the students there at Essex University, under the wing of Eric Hobsbawm. He solves the conundrum. Why do these populists, and he is a populist philosopher, he defends populist philosophy. Why do they call themselves democratic? And here again we go back to the philosophers and writers. They call themselves democratic because they think that a democracy is the people deciding on everything. But where's the people? His idea is to build a people, to make up a people that doesn't exist. That's the idea that the populists are after. So you build the people by doing what? By fusing demands, as he calls them, and we call them entitlements, fusing entitlements into one thing so that people get angry and push out the representative democracy and have this populist view of democracy. Now, this is what we have to expect if we are not careful in many countries, in Latin countries and perhaps in others, to have people get angry, fuse their demands, and therefore have a different kind, become a people and have a different kind of government. And we have that in Cuba, we have that in Venezuela and in other countries now, also South America. The situation in South America is very worrying. you not only have Argentina doing its act as ever, but you also have Chile now, and you have Peru, the president with his white hat. I think he sleeps in his white hat. And then you go up to Mexico, and also what we have there is the whole of the southern continent going the wrong way, and the United States too. They're also going the wrong way. So it's really worrying what is happening there, and the idea is a Rousseauian one. We want to have general will, the general will deciding, and once the general will has decided, we are democratic, and we can impose whatever we want. So, to sum up what I said, and in detail you can find it in what I printed, is, as I said, the slumber of reason begets monsters. My thesis in this essay is that the dream of a harmonious and egalitarian society, where there's no private property, where clashes and violence are things of the past, where even peaceful competition has given way to cooperation, where we can develop our capacities to the full without having to choose or to specialize, is a dangerous illusion. And I'm going to quote Marx and Engels in German Ideology in the 1860s, 1864 they wrote. It really is a text to watch, to understand. Were they silly? Could they say something like that? No, they hoped for a new kind of society. And what he said was, in a world of abundance, it will make possible for me to hunt in the morning, fish in the afternoon, rear cattle in the evening, criticize after dinner, just as I have a mind, without ever becoming a hunter, fisherman, herdsman, or critic. We believe in specialization. We believe in knowing our trade. And they have this idea, and that's why it's the attraction of it, of a future society where you have no conflict and where everybody can get whatever they want. And I think that we have to remember that utopia is a dangerous place. That's what moves us, moves them, saying, we can have utopia. Forget about the market, forget about competition. And I think utopia is a beautiful maiden with her head in the clouds and her feet in rivers of blood. Thank you.